along down this road with me.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Speak Project. This is Speak Up with Tank, and I am your host, Stephen Rowe, a.k.a. Tank. And tonight should be a pretty exciting night. We already had a very, very special broadcast earlier today, kind of an emergency broadcast to bring some attention to our ally and friend, Michelle Walker, who has been working very diligently to expose many, many things of the master depopulation agenda, although she's focused more on the way that they are attacking the children specifically and working with the mortgage electronic registration system, as well as some very in-depth other conspiracies to what appears to sound like a civil war that's been caused. So she shared with us a whole bunch of details about that today, and we will make sure to fact-check those things, but I can tell you for surety that a lot of the stuff she said was 100% true, and certainly her personal experiences are a little bit dangerous. She got cut off during the call. She recently had her daughter's boyfriend who allegedly committed suicide, and I do think this is important to kind of talk about the mode of operations of how these structures work, the various agencies, the shadow side of them. Michelle's grandfather was a veteran who committed suicide. Her husband was a veteran who committed suicide. So this is a very real trigger for her. Now, her daughter's boyfriend was he actually had purchased tickets to the prom. He had contacted his girlfriend, Michelle's daughter, at 4:30 in the afternoon and told her that he would be there by 6:30. So he clearly had plans, but somewhere in the midst of that, the story that they're trying to say is that he committed suicide between 4:30 and 6:30, in that time, and never showed up. And in that, apparently, he tried to commit suicide by giving himself a bloody nose, by having defensive wounds, and he tried to hang himself, eventually doused himself with lighter fluid, and died from carbon monoxide poison in the garage. So anybody who's keeping score on that kind of thing, you could probably put the pieces together. Matter of fact, anybody except for someone who is paid off, some kind of paid off coroner, would be able to put those pieces together and realize that that, in fact, was not a suicide. That was a torturous treatment to try to extract information and then ultimately leave him dead anyways. And they did that to psychologically torture Michelle. So we are very actively involved, and I just want to thank my veterans out there. I did put out a message immediately to the Corps vets. We have a group of Corps veterans who are actively working to create systems for veterans, including healthcare, including coping skills, including, what we call the active civilian duty of the veterans. There's never been a time in history where the veterans are more needed than right now. We need our veterans to be on board. We need them to realize that they are still on mission, and it has always been the same mission, which is to defend the Constitution, protect the people, and protect the United States of America. So we are gathering them together, and true to form, as I've known vets to be my whole life and all my experiences with them, I put out about 3 text messages, and within 5 minutes, I had half a dozen veterans ready to drive there to protect Michelle themselves. And fortunately, we were able to, fortunately, we were able to get the right people in place immediately, and they are already working with her to make sure that she is safe. The message she has is very important. She's been very courageous. She's like a 5'4", 130-pound soaking wet kind of little thing that's courageously standing up against the order and against these corrupt organizations, and she is revealing very, very hard facts. And these facts that she is revealing, they have the potential to really expose and bring down the order if they are allowed to get out to the mainstream. But because the mainstream is so corrupt, we need everybody's help. So anybody out there who has any connection to anything, any social media, any place, please go to speakproradio.com and you will see there. I'm not sure how we label it. Actually, I think it's labeled maybe, an emergency broadcast with Michelle Walker. But it was today, and take that and cut and paste it and share it everywhere. Put it on your YouTube channel. Put it on your Facebook. Put it on your Instagram. Put it everywhere, because it is valuable information, and it's essential that if we're going to fight and if we're going to win, we have got to stand together to overcome nearly impossible odds. But I'm a believer in overcoming the impossible, so I'm very excited to help and contribute to that in any way that I can. So please, I would ask you to adopt and embrace the same attitude that I have. Do all that you can. Don't put that responsibility on someone else. Take it on yourself. And with that in mind, we have a guest here with us today. Let me just check and see if he is available. Matt, are you on the line? Matthew? 1 second. I will pull him in right now. Been kind of a fast and furious day here. And we are really going to talk about some of the amazing things we're doing with Create Change. Matthew, is that you?
It's Gunner, but Matthew should be on right now.
All right, Gunner. Hey, man, did you get a chance to listen to the show earlier today?
No, I didn't. Sorry, I don't know.
You have a job. I mean, I didn't tell you. I was just curious if you're not in trouble. But yeah, it's definitely a big day today, man. Big day. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I really got to tell you, we're on the verge of just breaking through on a whole different level. And Matthew is an author, and he's actually got a program to put libraries in, good old-fashioned libraries. I'm sure he's got an advancement on that all over the world. And I'm going to bring him on right now.
Yeah. Do you know what his area code is?
I got him right here. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, hello.
All right. Hey, Matthew. Sorry about that, man. I had to check your number there quick. We had a bunch of callers all at the same time.
No, it's me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we know.
Okay.
Hi. So, Matthew,
yes.
Before we get started, man, give us a little background. You contacted me a while back, to kind of offer assistance, right? You are an author, and you're an excellent writer. I've read some of your stuff, and what do you think? What do you think of the current state of the union right now? I mean, tell us a little bit about yourself and.
I certainly can. I'm actually sort of honored. I'm smiling that you want to know anything about me hiding out here. Where to begin?
By the way, the self-defecating talented author, I love that. It's okay. Go ahead.
Takes one to know one, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Correct me up.
Exactly.
Well, that's one of the best ways to hum and haw when you're not sure what you're doing. So, well, let me begin. Let's start at the important part. A currency holder, among other things. I'm a writer, a bon vivant, if you will, an academic, a couple of places.
Matthew.
Yes.
Your connection's a little bit off. So if you just try to get in the best spot, and just because I really want people to hear what you have to say, really try to just enunciate very clearly, just so we can hear you, because there's just a little bit of drawl going on there with your connection.
Okay. Is this any better?
Yep, that's perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I was just saying that academically trained, done a few things in my lifetime, including run a couple of campaigns at the political level, certainly been an athlete and done a few things at that level. As I say, sort of a bon vivant who's at this point pretty interested in, I guess, with what is topical here, and that is with the directions of certainly world and national politics and where the nation's going, but certainly where the world is going and hopefully where the human race is going. I'm dealing with a lot of people who are watching some changes, some significant earth changes actually, that seem to be out of the ordinary and hopefully represent movement from wherever it is we've been as a race of people to someplace that's hopefully more exalted. So I know that's sort of loosey-goosey and intentionally so, but I'm not so sure that anything that I would say that represents my work is anywhere near as important as what we're going to talk about here today in terms of where we as a corpus, we as a collective of individuals can go and what we can do to make the world better.
Well, I love everything you just had to say and the very intelligent way you said it. I also love the term loosey-goosey, which I find to be very funny. So Matt, tell me what you're doing. You know, I always take note of project owners. You know, like I don't bring people on unless I find them to be fascinating and talented and have something to offer. And certainly you do, right? I mean, you obviously have a message. You know, you can tell just by the way you speak. Thank you. You know, you're very, very humble about it, but at the same time, you know, I know better, right? Oh, sorry.
let me share with you what ultimately I want to do at some point when we all get to that place where we can actually help and do something positive for hopefully for the world. I have a project that I have been working on for actually more than 20 years. It's called the International Children's Library. And the whole idea of that particular project is to, with help from my friends and support from wherever we can, the whole idea originally was to have one placement of at least one physical library in all 209 countries in the world, hopefully more. But the whole idea was to link children around the world with the technology that they need to make this reasonable and doable. The whole idea of the library is to link children and secondarily their parents and tertiarily their community. The whole idea is to do some things to link us all together so that we can actually start doing some things that education systems throughout nations have not been doing. Still there?
Yeah, Matthew, I'm here. I was just I have a gang full of young guys in my house right now eating pizza. So I'm just making sure their mother knows that I'm taking care of them.
Gotcha. Multitasking.
Yep. Well, you know, it's I have yesterday with Dan Lutz. You know, we had really set out on a mission to, you know, it's heartbreaking in a way for me at times. You know, it's really a struggle because I talk to a lot of people. I talk to people all over the world, and you know, I've really put together a lot of dynamic things to help people and to change the world. And as I talk to those people, you know, a lot of times they don't realize how diminished our resources are. You know, and that we do this, you know, many times, you know, most of the time with almost nothing. And you know, so we're always pressing. And so, you know, Dan and I really talked about it. Part of the reason why it's so hard is because there's this collective consciousness that is so consumed with the currency revaluation. And, you know, because I speak directly with the only person on the planet who could make that happen, and I know that she has adamantly said there's absolutely no way I'm going to let that happen, because if she did let it happen, it would cause the economic collapse of the entire world, which is the situation, right? There's a economic assassination taking place right now.
Yes.
And so, you know, I'm always, you know, to do this. So we did 90 shows straight yesterday. It was 90 straight shows we did in a row, because at the end of the day, you either get the message out in mass quantity or you get it out to a lot of people, right? In general, I mean, I'm sure you can speak to this as an author, right? You know that great ideas have tremendous power, right?
Yes.
Massive numbers have tremendous power. You know, the sheer brute strength has tremendous power. Now, when you have a great idea, though, if you can't communicate that great idea to enough people, it's almost like it's so powerful it can blow you up, right? so but in this system, the way it's set up, it's not designed for people to really thrive. So if you have a great idea that's not in line with the former system of control, that idea doesn't really get a chance to blossom. And so we decided to just really nonstop, no matter what, no matter if we have kids or parties going on or anything, no matter what, we decided to do broadcast. And in that, we were able to finally launch the Speak Project, which is why you're here today. And I think it is of the utmost importance that no matter what's going on in my life, that I want to give my kids a better life. I want them to be able to be amazing.
May I address something that you just brought up that's really interesting, and it has to do with that which is enigmatic about where modern technology has us. You would think that with technologically computers and everything else that's going on, you'd think that we would thus be able to communicate better, more discreetly, more concretely to one another, and it would be my offer. I would suggest and throw out there, discuss. But I'm of the opinion that just because of the volume of information and because of the atomized quality of our relationships, I think it's harder than ever for us to really communicate without being very concerted about what we're doing and having a focus to that. I would also add, if I can, that I think your comment just now is very, very important, because underneath it, it's saying that, if I'm hearing you properly, I hear you saying that no matter what the technologies are, no matter what the physical supports are, without both a consciousness and a willingness to get out there and do the work, whatever the work is that as a collective you decide to do, and I said as a collective, without your willingness to do that, then all the technology in the world won't help, all the money in the world won't help. And I think given the currency community in the last 10 years or so that I've been part of it, I think that's been my real concern. I don't want to get out over my skis here, but my real concern has been that so many people have been talking about the tangential, the ancillary concerns about money, and everyone's pretending that, we want to do these things and help to put a tip down on whatever. We all talk about that, but ultimately what's really core here is understanding that anything that happens in this new currency community, in this new atmosphere, anything that doesn't have a serious level of consciousness and a serious level of commitment to ideals, not materials, but commitment to ideals. If we don't get that, then we're just sort of spitting in the wind.
I'll tell you something. One, I love everything you just said and exactly how you said it. I tell people this, and I've felt this way for a good part of my adult life, is I am not loyal to people. I am loyal to ideals.
Yes.
I believe, in having those core principles guide everything in my life and every relationship in my life. And when people break from those things, it's not like I'm not forgiving, but when they decide to go a different path, I just let them go. And I think that always keeps you on, where you're supposed to be in your life. Now, but in addition to that, I think you're absolutely right. See, the core, the key to all this is connection, right? And
yes,
one of the hardest things to really accomplish in the current digital age, right, is to connect to people on a way that actually has an impact, right? Because connection only matters if it has an impact. It's not enough just to say the right thing. Those words have to connect in a way that touches people, and they realize, oh my gosh, that's real, right? And what we're up against right now, particularly, we could use the currency community, like you said, right? I'm not overly critical of people wanting to have money, right? Because yes, it manifests in their discussion and the things they want and it being about monetary value, but in reality, money is just energy, and what that energy represents to them is freedom. And I do very much value freedom over anything. At the end of the day, being liberated and having the opportunity to be free and freely express ourselves to the full capacity of who we are is absolutely essential for humanity to reach its potential and to blossom and to be able to care for this world in a way that is, in harmony with what this world is capable of. And the problem, is there's people that I think they get very critical about this. They're like, oh, you're too materialistic. It's too about money. No, I'm not. Personally, I'm not. It doesn't even faze me when people say that. I think it's laughable because even if I want very nice things, I'm still not materialistic because I've learned how to be with very nice things and I've learned how to be without. Either way, it doesn't change who I am. Now, when people think these things are their identity, right, and these things mean that they're important, that is where we have a problem. And that's the current materialistic world we do live in, is that people have stuff and they think that stuff gives them the right to speak and have a voice when they don't know what they're talking about a lot of times. And that's why you have this fraudulent group in the government where we are rewarding constantly mediocrity. It's as if there was exceptional people. No, not that there was, but it's as if there was exceptional people and very low people, and then somewhere in the middle we all just said, okay, we'll just take you right here in the middle, and we'll just stay safe. But it wasn't safe, right? It's this rewarded environment of bloodline, draconian, Anunnaki, whatever, these families that think they rule the world, all these dragon families. And what they have rewarded and they've exalted is conformity. They don't want individual, independent thinkers who are divergent, who are outside the box, who are creating better ways to do things, more efficient ways to do things. They are afraid of it. Now, what's your experience? I feel like you're that kind of guy. Like, you have good ideas, and I feel like I can see people being afraid of those ideas.
Well, thank you for that awareness. I wanted to share something with you, and as gabby as I am, it's really hard not to interrupt you. But I just wanted to say that I remember some research from years and years and years ago. But some group of people actually researched some individuals and found out that after, I think it's 5 months, but let's say for sure 7. But after 7 months, do you know what the people who buy them call their Rolls Royces?
That old car?
A car. After 7 months, a Rolls Royce is a car. And that's speaking to your point that made earlier. In reality, one of the problems that I think we have in the culture today is we have more people quasi-communicating technologically, but they are, in fact, not actually communicating from 2 places. One, from being able to understand one another with that assembly, but more importantly, I think they're not being able to communicate because within us, we are not making sure that our children have a positive sense of whom they are and themselves. They have to. They think that they are valuable if they look like Kanye. Help me for saying that one. It just came to my mind. But if they look like someone else, or if they can sound like someone else, and I'm a musician as well. And one of the things that you have to learn in almost any endeavor is what makes you valuable and what sets you aside is going through and learning who everyone else is in terms of the music world. We're trying to learn everyone so that out of that you can metamorphose. You come out of that. And I'm not watching enough people at any level. It doesn't matter where. It can be children, it can be adults. I'm not watching enough people in this culture today, and maybe the world culture, have enough sense of themselves. And I don't mean this in a selfish sense, or take it back. I don't mean this in a self-centered sense, not centric. I want selfish. I want us to recognize that there is something of value that we have to offer one another and to the world. And without that, you can material all you want to. You can do anything you want to. You're not bringing anything to the party.
I love that, right? This is a, like kind of a Count of Monte Cristo kind of concept to me, right? Where
yes,
you take this character and he just ends up getting the opportunity to completely focus on his own isolation and developing his own skills, his own knowledge, his understanding. He comes to understand what he loves and what he hates, what he appreciates and doesn't, right? And that time, that experience is very rare in this day and age, right? It is so much of our conscious experience is not just outside of us, which that I don't have a problem with that. Looking at the vast connection we have to everything, both past, present, and future, simultaneously. I value that, right? But the problem is the interference with the frequency being constantly broadcast, not allowing us to actually think, but replacing our ability to think.
Let me interrupt you. I'm bursting.
Yeah, go ahead.
What you're saying here is something that I think about, and that is that René Descartes, the philosopher, would not exist in the world that we have today. He is responsible for the notion that goes, "I think, therefore I am." Right? Just those 5 salient words that really say, "Okay, I have consciousness," which brings me into the plane. I'm now in the game. We don't have enough a sense of ourselves either as a collective, a human collective, and maybe not as individuals as well. We don't have a positive enough sense of ourselves to see ourselves as being at that level valuable. And if you can't do that, then I can't bring anything else to anyone else if I don't have something to bring from self. And so I think what we're both discussing here is a sad, if we're not careful especially, I think we're watching a sad set of dynamics take place where you have more people gathering together and getting more externalities, but not having the core to make those things valuable.
That's a great point, because they've demonized any sense of critical observation, critical thinking. Everyone loves to use these terms like, "Hey, no judgment," right? We drop those little catch terms, right? And we think that we're being very pious in doing that, right? Like, I don't judge. Now, if you don't judge, first of all, please don't come around me, because I need people who cast judgment, who make a judgment, right? Who discern what's happening, right?
Yes,
versus people who are just like, no judge. I'm not judging. Oh, you're doing this horrible thing? No judgment. Like, I don't want that around my life at all. Like, first of all, everybody judges. We all make decisions about where we're going to be, who we're going to be with, what we like, what we don't. These are all judgments, right? These are the ways we process who we are by what we're experiencing externally and knowing I like this or I don't, right? I mean, that's overly simplified, of course, but when you really tap into what's possible in thinking, right, in our thought process is the very nature of creation, right? It's our imagination. Einstein said that imagination is more valuable than, I forget, but something to that effect. It's more valuable than anything else we have, right? Because imagination is where all things are possible. And if humans just recognize the power of the mind they already possess, I constantly consider this double split test that was done in, I believe, the 70s, okay, where they're firing these protons down this tunnel, right, and there's a divider in the middle, and the expectation of the scientists was sometimes the protons will go left, sometimes they'll go right, and sometimes they'll hit in the middle. That was what they hypothesized would happen. And they sat there and they made notes. And lo and behold, what happened every time? Left, right, middle, every single time. Now, when the scientists were removed completely from the observation and their thoughts no longer were able to influence the outcome, they saw every single time that the protons came down the tunnel, they went left, right, and center. They hit the wall every single time. And the logic would be like, how is that possible? And the reasoning, based on science we know about, would say, well, that must be an anomaly. It must have split. But it didn't split. 3 protons, identical in nature, the same proton, existed in all 3 possibilities at the same time. Now, that concept is so revolutionary and groundbreaking, and still is not magnified enough. Because what that means is our thoughts and expectations completely change what the matter around us does. So in other words, we decide what matters. We decide. And in our decision of what matters, what we expect, what we believe will happen, is exactly what is happening. Now, that's an incredible concept, because that means by taking away our ability to think critically and to think intelligently and to be Imagineers, right, and really dream and expound on the incredible possibilities that we want to be real. Because we don't do that, we limit the possibilities to these options.
You're absolutely right. And at first I thought you were talking about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which is a different concept, and it's not that. But I actually recently have been sort of looking at that dynamic. And one of the things I think we know is that when we begin as children looking and learning, and as human beings, we end up affirming what we think we've learned. So what that really says is actually in support of what you're suggesting. We actually actuate our own existence by our own consciousness, which goes back to Descartes. But what we're saying is because I am there, the field is fertile, is available for us to be able to move forward from that point and learn more. And the problem for me, looking at some of this, is that the opposite may also be true. If we don't know that we are there, if we don't know what we have going, if in the case of currency, most of us don't really know who is responsible for what's being done, who's responsible for this whole process, if there is a process. Most of us don't know. And because we're in that limbo, we from that point cannot move. I think there's an old notion that goes, it's better not to do anything and mess stuff up if you don't know where you're going. And I'm watching those dynamics take place at the micro level and at the macro level. I'm watching people at every turn in my life. I've walked by periodically in the morning. I walk the streets with one of my dogs. The other one's gone now, but I'll say hello to people. Good morning. And I'll say something if she's a handsome young woman. I'll say that's the prettiest face I'm going to see today. And because of that, because that seed is planted, 90+% of the time, except for the people who think, well, what's this guy want from me? But 90% of the time, I'll get a person's positive response, and that's because I'm sort of leading that individual to understand that there is something positive and good there. And if I were to say, hey, fatty, get away from the bus stop, I'd probably get a negative response. So we do have the capability, and it's not just being a positivist. I think it has to do with really being able to influence our environment, our surroundings. I think that's where the spiritualists who talk about positivity, I think that's where they're right about that. I think that's where that comes in.
You know, I stay away from the term of positive or negative, but I do understand, specifically why you say that, because just being someone who just says positive things, right, has actually become a perversion, right? It's become where I just ignore my real feelings. I suppress my depression, my sadness, my hatred, my anger, and I just smile no matter what. And what I do is I essentially pervert the whole frequency of what I'm trying to do, right? So I really value connecting with that real frequency, that allows us to actually be happy, right? And I love what you're saying, and I appreciate you not calling, walking up to people and saying, hey, fatty, because obviously we don't want to hurt people's feelings, right?
Never.
But it's, it's something I practice myself, what you're talking about. And the way I see it is, now you'd probably consider yourself an artist, right, as a writer? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I used to be an art teacher, and I am an artist myself. And what I used to always tell my students is what makes an artist is not someone who can play music, who can draw, who can write, who can paint, who can sculpt. An artist is one who can see. And if you see, and you truly see, your eyes become so swollen with the beauty of the world that you're in. Even the way Da Vinci did, where he just would look at the ugliness of things, and it was still beautiful. That when that happens, it's impossible not to want to create. It's impossible not to express that, because you're looking and you're seeing. Now, this is what I'll say about the currency revaluation. there is something to it, but it really is not about money, because the money is not going to revalue. But the current C, so in other words, what we currently see has to revalue for us to move on. See, exactly what you're talking about, we have to have a higher value for who we are. We have to have a higher value for what we see. And we need to spend much more time focused on the incredible things that go right for us every single day. Because in reality, most things go our way. They really do. Think about it. You woke up today, you took a big, deep breath. You made it through the night, first of all. So things are going your way already, right? I mean, because you didn't do anything. You were just laying there, right? But your lungs are working. Your heart is beating. You opened your eyes. You don't even know how it works. They just see. All day long, things are going your way. The trees are making oxygen for you. You know, you have vehicles to drive around in. You have people that love you. And sometimes you don't even love yourself. That is just parts of the amazing, undervalued aspect of being human. That we get to be in touch and in tune with the entire planet and each other, and the good and the bad, and be able to experience all these things fully and really connect to them. And you know what I find is that I naturally connect to people more and more all the time. Not because I'm being overly positive, because I'm being exactly real, and I'm being honest about exactly what I see, good and bad, and I'm being honest about how I feel, and I'm being honest about what's happening. And the more honest I am about what I see, both spiritually and physically, the more I realize the world just opens up, and everything I want to happen happens. It just causes a natural response where and once you're conscious of it, just like you said, the biggest danger is that we are unconsciously manifesting. We're unconsciously creating a world that is dark and is sad and is angry and is divisive. And I can look at someone else, and even though he's a man and could be the same age and could be a father and could have the same experiences, and I look at him, but he's got a different religious belief than me, and I can't even go near him, right? He was raised in a different country. These tiny little differences are so small by comparison to the amazing things we all have in common. And I'm constantly pressing and trying to draw that out of people to realize we're not so different. We're really not. We all want to feel safe and secure. We all want to be able to build something when we want to, and we want to be able to enjoy it when we want to. We all want to create. It's just natural. We all just might want to create in different ways, you know. And that's part of the, you know, I think we all want to test our limits, you know.
This is interesting. I once, Bill was lucky enough, while he was living, I'm old enough to have seen him, got to listen to James Baldwin, the great writer, speak, and he began the conclave, the gathering of people who were listening to him with two tenets, and you've touched on them both. He said, before we do anything, before we try to understand race or America or anything, he said, let's start with two premises. Okay. And the first one was that everyone likes to think well of themselves. And number two, everyone likes to feel safe. And if we start any conversation from that perspective, a couple of things happen. We begin to understand something different about the individual who we're trying to communicate with. But we also do an interesting thing, which is we make ourselves part of as opposed to the objective observer, we make ourselves both an integral part of what's going on and thus responsible for making sure that it goes on with alacrity and alarm and dignity and care. And most of us are so busily being self-consumed and unrequited and not at all getting enough of what we need, both at the individual and at the collective level. I think as a culture, we don't do enough for each other and thus ourselves, and so we miss that takeoff point. We miss being able to sit down and really go, hey, I really can do some stuff, and I really can be some stuff, because I already am. Yeah. My martial arts instructor used to say a wonderful statement for part of the Budo, the Japanese way, and one of the things he used to ask is, do you see what you see?
Oh.
We think we see, but do you see what you see? And I know that sounds sort of cryptic and maybe crazy for the conversation, but I think it's
No.
and I think it's to the point. I think we need to sit down constantly and evaluate and check what it is that we bring to the party. What biases do I bring? What preconceptions do I bring? We need to be self-aware, if not self-consumed. So.
And I do like the term self-conscious. I know that's been kind of demonized, for kids, right? Like, we don't want anyone to be self-conscious, but we can flip that term and really just, if we just identified it exactly for what the words are, is I'm self-conscious. I'm conscious of myself. I think about this all the time. I'm very conscious that I can be overwhelming as a person. I know that. So because I'm conscious of it, it makes me consciously more gentle and more kind, right? Because I know I can be overwhelming, right? I can be too loud. I can be too dogmatic when I'm speaking about things.
Yes.
Because I'm self-conscious about it. Now, I'm not insecure about it. That's the problem, is we think self-conscious means insecure. I think self-consciousness is really a tool to make us more secure and more effective and more impactful in everything we do.
It's being self-aware. It's being self-aware.
Yeah.
It's being self-aware. I'm here. Yes, I'm here. Someone once reportedly as well. Someone once asked Buddha. They said, so someone was walking with him, and they said, Buddha, you are so knowledgeable. You are so wise. You are so overwhelmingly what you are. They said, are you God? Buddha, are you God? And Buddha's response was, am I God? Am I God? No, I'm awake. I'm awake. Consciousness. Yes, I'm awake. I may be on the wrong side of an issue from your perspective, but I'm here. I'm in the game.
Yeah.
And so I think, and taking that, we're being wonderful for me. I love this kind of conversation, but for the audience who may be more interested and wondering if the dinar is going to come in at 375 or 420 for people who are aware, at that level, I would suggest to them that it's absolutely important. Excuse me for being big breath here, but it's absolutely important for you to start thinking about these issues and ideals, because after you get past the third bottle of champagne that you popped, right, and you recognize that you got more problems than you ever thought you were going to have because you got more money and now you're going to have problems. Once you get past the nonsense of this and recognize that maybe you are in this game for a cause that might be karmic and cosmic and way beyond anything you understood, now it's like being on the football field, which I've been. Guess what? Now you got to perform. That's what a graduate instructor told me when Northwestern when I was there. He said, I don't care that you got all A's. He says, yeah, well, now that you got here and now you're here, you could have gotten into the computer and whatever. He said, now that you're here, you've got to perform. And I think we all need to understand and appreciate that now that we are in ourselves, now that we are coming to wherever it is that we'd like to be, no matter what our age is, it's time for us to, talk to ourselves and talk to each other and perform. At least try. The old black statement, nothing beats a failure but a try.
I'll tell you, oh my gosh, don't ever quote TNT on my call ever again, please, ever. Don't ever. I don't want any of that vibe that me.
That's not TNT. Is that what Ray and
yeah, they always say that.
Tony?
No.
I'm probably older than you guys. No, that's an old black statement from the South, my brother. Oh, no. Ain't nothing to be saved but the try. and in a funny way, it sort of it forces again a salience. It forces an awareness. For me to fail or succeed, it means implicitly I have to recognize that there's a me there, that me is connected to lots of other me's and lots of other stuff outside, and we're all part of a big, once you figure it out, you start understanding that there's more here to be done than just me, and me is not individual. Me is actually a collective once you figure it out. It really is. You or me, I can't have this conversation without you right now.
Right. No, listen, believe me, I've been on the radio many times monologuing, and it's miserable, and I have a lot to say, but I don't even want to just hear myself because I want to feel the connection to someone else, and I have no problem, I don't think I have attachment issues because of that either, because people will be very critical of that, you can't be by yourself, I'm like, no, it's not true. I would just prefer, and I like to be by myself, but I prefer the interaction of, other people, especially intelligent people who are challenging, right, and bringing up different perspectives and making me grow, right? We all, they've done a lot of studies on this, and they show how all of us create this torus energy field, right? And it's like, kind of like butterfly wings that extend out around us, right? And we all create this. Now, I actually went to a Mayan ritual one time when I was a few years back, and they measured our aura, right? We did this whole rebirthing thing. It was it was cool, you know. And I really appreciated the principles because they were really solid. They were really we were in the canopy of the actual Mayan rainforest and the Riviera Maya and stuff, and really talking to the people in a way that was just incredible, right? And I think about this because I realized back then, and that was 12 years ago maybe, and I remember realizing then that the light we create, the experiences we have, the energy we generate, it reaches out and it touches all these other people. And every person that is touched by your energy, you are now responsible for on some level, right? So I have just endeavored, which I'm sure you can appreciate as an author, I've endeavored to make my words so clear because words are so powerful because they can completely disrupt the frequency that you're trying to put out, right? They can take the vibe you're putting out and pervert it. So it's so important to make sure that your words match your vibe, I had a guy who was just did an amazing job, and he was sharing these incredible ideas of his on our show, sometime last week. And in this, he was also very Christian, and which is fine. I'm not for or against any religion, really. But in this, right, there's certain rhetoric that has been programmed into Christianity, right, such as sacrifice. So the idea of sacrifice becomes a noble thing. But sacrifice isn't what it's supposed to be, right? The Messiah was not supposed to be sacrificed, right? And in reality, this is in the rhetoric whenever you hear Christians talk, they always say this, right? You ask a Christian, are you saved, right? Because that's the goal of the whole theology, right? Is to be saved. And they'll say yes. And you'll say, how do you know? And they'll always say the same thing. And any Christian on the call can verify what I'm saying. They'll say, because I know I have accepted that Jesus Christ died on the cross for my sins. Now, that is the reason, right? That's why, and that's the focus. Now, think about how that really contradicts what they're trying to say. Because if I just looked at it literally from what's written, if the Messiah died, and that's the only reason why you're saved, well, then you're not saved. Because then he resurrected, then he showed many signs and wonders for 40 days, then he ascended, and then finally he poured out the Holy Spirit in the hearts and the minds of men, right? Now, we don't need to make that a literal translation, but if you just look at the principle, and if you were looking, now I don't believe that that's what the Messiah's mission was to save people. He was there to enlighten people, to show them who they already were, right? That's my personal belief on that. Now, but even so, just take the principle, right? So now you think you say you're saved, it's because he died, but that was the victory of the devil, so to speak, right? Because the devil crucified him. But the victory of the people was in the outpouring of the Holy Spirit when they realized who they were. That was the real. And to be honest, that's the second coming of Christ too, because it says he poured himself out. Now, it's amazing when you say that. I mean, I've lost friends because of saying things like that, right? And my family is very, very devoutly Baptist. I mean, like incredibly devoutly Baptist. Like their whole life. I mean, they're about it, right? And beautiful people too. But you know, it took me years of just ignorance as my youth, just spouting off and being insensitive, like you were talking about before, not having an impact with my words, just being offensive, right? Not being responsible for what I was trying to say. But I think about that all the time, that it'd be so much more impactful if we looked at the resurrection and the life that exists in us, right? And realizing that is what the Messiah did. He was, you know, pouring out knowledge, right, and consciousness, so to speak. And it's completely different. Completely different than he died.
I got to get in here. One of the problems, and thank you. I'm glad that we can broach. We should be able to broach anything if you really want to do it properly. But most people's approach to certainly Westerners religion is solipsistic. It's circular, pretty much logic. If it's logic at all, most people who, especially Christians, but any of the Abrahamic tradition, they ultimately, when you ask them how they know what they know, they base it on a belief that they already have. And that is not the best way of explaining to a Martian what's going on here. But beyond that, I would say one of the problems that we have in introducing the Godhead to what's going on out there in the sphere, in the open sphere. Well, the problems we have with that is that we take our biases and we automatically introduce them into a situation where they may not really apply. I'm sorry for those who think they are religiously adherent to faith, and I get that. But in reality, at least a reality, if I flap my arms all day long, I will not make it to the moon. So we tend to bring a whole core of biases that we've had before we got there to try to explain something that is supposed to be novel and new. I bring my biases, and it's like here's a great example. It's like I've had 3 girlfriends, and my first 3 girlfriends, they all hurt me, and they beat me up emotionally, and they hurt me, right? And so now I go up to this next young woman who's just absolutely attractive and interested in me, and I'm not able to have a relationship with her because I'm bringing the baggage from before. I'm not willing to sit down and see as an independent, in an independent context, what's going on here. That happens not just in relationships, but personal. But I think that happens in terms of how most humans approach everything that is new to them, which does not allow them to really discover. Inventione, who was it? I'm forgetting my Italian leader, but in invention, we're not being able to see what is there because we dapple and adorn all events with our own biases. I mean, people don't get it, but seriously, believe what you believe. But if you were born somewhere in Tibet and were not around anything Christian, would you know any the Christian or the Judaic or the Muslim sense of what? Would you know any of that? That cannot be. That cannot be. If I believe in that with all my heart, it cannot be the way I go up and walk up to someone else and meet them, because I'm imposing my biases, my beliefs on them, and in the process, 2 things happen. Number 1, I don't let them be who they are, and number 2, I never grow.
Right. Well, you know, this is what I call our marriage to absolute truths, right? We are married to things that are absolute, and that sculpts everything else in our reality. Because this is the one thing that I absolutely know, right? And because I know this one thing, anything you say that contradicts that, I know you are the devil, right? Like, so now I know something about you. Yeah, so I can draw my own assumptions and judge you, and because you just assaulted my absolute truth. And, you know, I love what David Hayden talked about this. He was talking about imagination at the TED Talks, and he said, if you want to grow, let go of everything you think you know.
Yes.
And that really is where you're able to blossom and to become a more balanced and a more impressive, a more substantial, complete human being, right? You know, I spent my whole life endeavoring for this. You know, I was raised in a Baptist church. Then I spent 20 years as a minister, not a paid minister, but a minister. And I did speak. I dedicated my life to constantly, every day, better understanding God. And I preached all over the country, and I ran the speakers committee, and I was a superintendent, and I did all types of things, you know, and all of it, you know, for free. You know, I played the bass in the gospel band that I learned how to play when I was 30, right? And my life revolved around this, and it really forced me not to see anything outside of it, because everything was dedicated to that. Now, everything about both of those religions was based on shame and guilt and fear.
Yes.
You better do this. And then on top of that, there would be salvation is based on grace and mercy. Now, grace is an unmerited gift, and mercy is when you deserve punishment, but you don't get it. So in other words, you have absolutely no say on what you are or who you're going to be. And that was taught, I mean, that was pounded in my head over and over and over again. So I spent my whole life trying to be myself and be at peace with God, right? And I couldn't find the balance. And it wasn't until I finally just left all religions behind me and just allowed myself to just connect with God that, you know, and went through horrible things, have been, you know, beat up and tore down and all types of things. But in that, what I found is I know I am being myself, and I know I'm at peace with God, or whatever that, you know, that higher energy is. And it's amazing because it's not any way I ever would have thought it would have come, right? Because I thought there was a pious route that I was going to take. Certain accomplishments would show me, you know, certain things would happen, and this is how I'd know. But in reality, none of those things are true. So letting go of those things changed my whole life.
May I share something? 10 years ago, I was sitting in a nice little cabin in outside of Reykjavik in Iceland, about 30, 40 miles out of Reykjavik. And I was dealing with a friend and partner who also had this ability to channel certain stuff. And I'm very critical of lots of stuff. And my eyes sort of flew open when I realized that once she started channeling the other person, her English ability to speak English was better than it is normally. And that sort of blew me, had my eyes fly open. But at some point, I talked to the second entity. Hope the rest of the audience can get with it. Spoke to that second entity, and I said, are you trying to have me believe that the Godhead is such that, and I went on to ask what I thought was being said, and her response, and this other entity's response was, oh no, I'm so sorry. I was not trying to confuse you about anything. I was just wanting you to know that any connection that you have to the Godhead, and then she pointed to the back of her head and drew a line from the back of her head straight up to the universe. Because she said any connection you have with the Godhead is direct. And I'm going, whoa,
wow,
whoa, whoa, whoa. So often, whenever you see, number one, when you see money associated with almost anyone's religion, and when you also see a power relationship, that is, I have to submit myself to anyone's belief system, that's almost always, and in my estimation, that's almost always someone's attempt to steal from me my sovereignty so then they can do with me what they will. Because once I surrender that, I'm gone. You can have me do anything.
I could not agree more. You know, I'm very allergic now at this point in my life, having been through two very, you know, deeply religious. My family was very religious, and then I was very religious on my own. And what I realized is exactly what you just said. The only, you know, contract we are really obligated to at this point is our relationship with God, our personal relationship with Source, or whatever you want that to be, with the universe.
However you want to call it, whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't think that, you know, God is so petty. with all the emphasis on a name, right? Now, I was very much part of, like, understanding the name of God, because, one of the Ten Commandments is thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain, right? Well,
yes.
the name, to take it in vain would mean to not use it. So I didn't appreciate when religions would not use a name, right? Like, Jews use Adonai, right? Which, I was like, well, it just sounds like I deny, right? Like, you're not acknowledging it, right? And then there was Yahweh. Now, Yahweh made sense to me because YHW are glide sounds, and everything, these are the sounds that your mouth doesn't need. You don't need your tongue or your vocal cords to make the sounds, right? So you breathe that name, so to speak. So that made sense to me, right? But I still put myself in subjection to that, right? And that is what I really don't see the value in, because when I look at my children, I am not looking for them to be subjected to me. I don't want them to be my slaves. What I want is for them to understand what's important and what's essential, and then I want them to define it for themselves in a way that makes them happy, in a way that makes sense to them, and have them be independent and still understand that there's certain principles that are just universal. Like, do no harm is a universal principle. It permeates to the entire galaxy,
Yes.
universe, whatever.
First, do no harm. Yes.
Right.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I was just repeating. First, do no harm. The Hippocratic Oath. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry for interrupting you. I'm so excited about the conversation. I don't get to do this very often, so thank you very much. I was going to ask you, given everything that we've having been an interviewer, I'm now doing your job and bringing it together, but not for the same reason. I want to get your opinion, your impression of how this works, but I want to bring this back to the currency audience, because I'm not sure that the only thing that unites most of us out there is the blessing that is supposed to be coming to us. And I'm not so sure that once that happens, that all bets aren't off. Everyone talks about, they're going to do this for humanity and that for humanity. And I'm talking to myself here too. I'm not excluding myself from the responsibility here, but I'm wondering about the community of individuals whose only uniting or unifying force has to do with a change in their capability to impact the world fiscally. And I don't know if they understand, as I think I do, that this is as much a damnation as it is a blessing. I don't know if they understand that. Now you got to give it up or tell where it is. You can't sit down and talk a whole bunch of mess anymore about if I were this and if I were that. Now you've got to sit down and you've got to really work until 2 or 3 in the morning sometime, because there's some resources that need to get out there, and you're the only one who can do it. Are you prepared to do that? I'm concerned about that, because if there isn't that kind of commitment within the community, with all the other negative crap that's going on out in the world that I live in, if you don't have that kind of focus and commitment, then it's just money and good stuff thrown away, and some people will, have a nice apartment to live in for a year, and then they'll be right back where they were. And I'm not interested in for me personally, I'm not interested in switching from a Chevy to a Ford. I'm interested in going to an electric car. I want to change the model. I want to change the paradigm. And most of us don't. I assume that most of us don't understand that that's not, number one, not as easy as it may sound, and number two, if it's not in your rearview mirror or in your headlamps going forward, then we're. I just worry. Excuse me for this. I'm a worrywart, and I'm just very concerned about where we go from here. What is it? What someone once said? My brother once said to me. It's not original, but he said the two ironies in life: one is not getting what you want, which is where we are right now, and the other is getting what you want. Now what? What do we do now?
Well, I'll tell you what. One, I'm going to relieve your worry from this standpoint.
Okay. Cool.
There is not going to be a global currency reset. It's not going to happen. I work directly with the only human being on the planet who could make that happen.
Okay.
And I will tell you that the real plan was a global reset. And the global reset, you can actually go to the speakproject.net, and you can go to the I lose this every time, but on there we have the Singleton document. And the Singleton document is the document that every country in the world signed. And every country in the world signed off on this document under the scope of the United Nations. Now, when this was signed, there was a sole sovereign monarch on the planet. And this monarch was a military dictator. He's referred to in documents as the King of Kings, sometimes the Great Dictator. When it comes to the Federal Reserve, he's referred to as the Arbiter. And he would have the final say. So it didn't matter what the contract said, because if he deemed it something else, it was that. It didn't matter. Right? Now, that always has existed. So we always give all this homage to, the Rothschilds or the Pessours or, these dragon families, right? But the dragon families were much lower on the totem pole in reality.
Yes.
And at the top of the order was always this great dictator. Now, this great dictator, his job was to gather up and register all of the assets on the planet, which he accomplished in 2007. So everything on the planet, both in-ground assets, above-ground assets, homes, buildings, everything was registered to the unknown country. Now, the unknown country is what is recognized in every single system, every single financial system, every single government system. It is the natural intelligence or the artificial intelligence that expands and maps everything on the planet. So the goal was to take the resources off planet, okay, and take possession of them, kind of like a cancer would, right? A cancer is supposed to die, right, through apoptosis. It doesn't die, so it can't create its own energy, so it devours things that are creating energy around it, right? Now, the draconian mentality was a cancer. And what they did was the draconian and the mantis would come in and they would devour the resources of a planet. They would kill off the race that was here or use them for whatever. And then they would essentially leave the planet, barren. And that was the goal, right? Now, in this, everyone below him was a slave. Everyone. Now, there was 154 people at the top or something about that. And then there was the families, right? Like the dragon families, the Canadian 300, all those kind of things.
Yep.
And they were all slaves. They were all slaves. And their job was to gather the resources of the planet. Now, the problem you're having now is what they've always done is they would take possession of an asset. They would put it into the asset redemption program. And what it would do is it would register it, right? So now the asset redemption program, which was the unknown country, or the trust now, the Manna World Holding Trust. And they would register that asset, and then it would give them back paper currency, right? It would say, here's an allocation number for you to go print this currency, right? And this is what its value is. And so they would go out with useless paper that, the dictator had no value for, right? He didn't care about the paper, right? So they would go out and they would spend it and live their lavish lifestyles and hedonistic ways and whatever, right? So that is what's happened forever. Now, they became experts at using this system. Now, this was all based on a contract. Now, the contract was made between humanity, right? And this was after the Great Deluge and, the fall of Atlantis and all of the, this great nuclear war, right? Which there's all types of evidence in the Mediterranean Sea and things. This great war that really destroyed a bulk of the planet, and it flooded it, right? And there was really like a water moon that crashed into the planet, and there was additional water that came into the planet. And so that changed the landscape of the planet. And so what happened was, there was supposed to be like an integration of like the native tribes and like the Atlanteans was supposed to be like some kind of integration, right? And that ended up getting infiltrated by the Draconians, right? They came in and kind of took over Atlantis. So, and then they ended up waging war with the very peaceful Lemurians. So, and then this ended up being a time of great grief where humanity was completely grief-stricken. So the Draconians being, they set up the whole situation, right, with the Mantis, and the Mantis would control the technology, and the Draconians were great warriors, right? So they took over the planet in return for being allowed to declare global martial law. They would rebuild the planet. And now this is like a 16,500-year-old contract, right? Now,
Yes.
those same characters were still in charge in 2012. Now, that contract expired in 2012. And the planet, if they were not able to bring the entire planet under one world government or the New World Order, then they had to return it back to humanity. So in 2012, they identified a genetic anomaly that happens about every 2,000 years. The genetic anomaly, you can see it with, Eve. You can see it with Joshua, the son of Nun, with the Messiah. All these different characters who clearly had a greater scope of abilities to communicate with the spirit and to just really understand the natural biological technology that is ingrained in all of us. So in earlier than this, but in 2012 it was confirmed that Kimberly Ann Gogan was 99.8% bioidentical to the mitochondrial Eve. So in other words, she is 99.8% bioidentical to the 5 original tribes on the planet, okay? And she was identified as the most human, and because the contract was going from draconian back to humans, in 2012, which I'm sure if you've been around the GCR at all, we all thought things were going to go in 2012, right? So everything was turned back over to humanity. So that was all, quantified and registered to the real quantum system, which is a quantum mapping system. It's not a quantum financial system. It's a quantum mapping system. And the quantum mapping system has the ability to literally entertain all possible realities at all times, just the way, when we talked about the split test, right? Or the, what do you call it, the Heisenberg?
No, that's the double slit test, I believe, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the principle, right, is that this quantum system is made by galactics that were also enslaved, and it's 1,000 years past any technology on the planet. And this device had already mapped all the assets, all the resources on the planet, and everything was registered to its ownership, right? So for humanity to take possession of this system means that humanity takes its rightful role as caretakers and guardians of the planet, right? Now, in that's what happened in 2012. Now, at that point, the Rothschilds and the Pasteurs and all these dragon families, they were given 5 years to return the assets of the planet back to the people. And they didn't even try. What they did instead was they took that as a 5-year extension to continue to try to implement their New World Order, right, and their one world government. So in those 5 years, that's why you have things like the global currency reset came to the surface, and everybody started to understand what it was. Now, the way the global currency the reset was set up is that they were slowly diminishing the value of the U.S. dollar since 1958 or so. And they were bringing the value of the dollar down because in the 70s, they all agreed that there would be a peaceful transition of power from the Americans in the West, the Black Dragons in the West, to the dragon families in the East and China. And that's why everything in the GCR was about the benevolent Chinese, how wonderful the Chinese are, the Chinese own everything, the Chinese elders, nonstop. All of that was because they are just another one of these Rothschild families. They're the same group is what I mean. Not that they're the Lees, the Gaos, but they all agreed that they were going to do this transition. So that's why from the 70s to now, you have a complete change in our perception of what it means to be American, what it means to be Chinese. They've implemented and expounded on the fat, lazy, dumbed down American, entitled American, right? And we don't understand the great ancient values of the Chinese. The Chinese have bought up Africa. They bought up land here. They've taken over parts of Canada. I mean, they've been taking over the world, right? Because in their contract, right, with each other, it was decided the Chinese would be the rulers for the next 100 years. Okay, so now we're witnessing that now. So part of this was the revaluation, which would have given the Chinese a decisive advantage because they would have got the highest possible rates and been able to revalue, and a few of us would have jumped in on that. Then they would have had the global currency reset, which is where everything would have gone to basically 1-to-1, right? Now, in doing that, what we thought was, well, everything's going to be asset-backed, and obviously we thought there was just a gazillion pounds of gold on the planet, which there's no possible scenario where that ever could be honored, ever. right? Because as soon as you do that, you would collapse the U.S. dollar, which is pegged to 146 countries, and it would immediately, overnight, it would collapse the world's economy. Okay? So what they had set up to transfer power to the Chinese in the East is they set up the structure. Now, you can see this in the Singleton report. They actually talk about it, right? That's where you get the ideas of universal income. So what they were going to do is, instead of letting us thrive and let us be, all of us be wealthy and distribute the wealth ourselves, which is the lie they told us, okay, what they planned to do was to allow exchanges to take place. Now, some of these exchanges, if you remember, they would always be talking about the exchange centers, right? So I know people, I spoke directly and often to white hats who were guarding the exchange centers. But I also had Marines on the ground outside of certain places, and they identified certain things such as stacks and stacks of coffins, stacks and stacks of guillotines, right? Now, this goes back to the rapture, right? Now, the Christians were indoctrinated with this idea of the rapture. And in the rapture, they actually had movies out about the raptures back in the 70s where, you know, everybody would be caught up who believed in Jesus, right? The true believers would be caught up, right? Now, the true believers who would be caught up, that was us, right? That was the currency holders nowadays, okay? And so they'd be caught up, and then the next step would be, you know, there'd be 7 years of judgment, and everybody left behind would be forced to get a mark on the back of their hand or their forehead, and that would be what nowadays we would consider to be a microchip that they would put in the back of your hand or your forehead, and that would end up being your cashless society they're always talking about, right? So this now we all get chipped, right? So now we're all chipped, and what they would do is, in this movie, they would have guillotines, and they would give people one last chance to conform, right, to be a slave, basically, to this United Nations system, this New World Order. And they'd lay them face up on the guillotine, right? Now, the reason why I mentioned that in the movie is because in this day and age, why on earth would we have guillotines, right? Why would that even be available? Well, because it's just a very archaic way of killing people, right? Well, and why would you need to kill people in mass quantities? Right? Why would you need to commit genocide? Well, the reason why is everything they predicted that they created, they have to bring to life. So they were executing their plan just the way they laid it out, right? You know, even with things like the keys of Enoch, right? That was a big thing, because there is a real principle with the keys of Enoch, because Enoch in the Bible, he was translated into heaven in the body. So he ascended in the body. Now that's the key to everything, is for us to ascend while still being in a body, not just to die off and ascend, right? Because that's always what they wanted us to believe, that we would just die off. So if we got, you know, bullied and ruined, our life was terrible, it's okay because we go on to heaven, right? So all these principles are false doctrines that they put out everywhere, and then they have worked to make them come to life. So that's why now when people see galactics, you know, they're so indoctrinated, they're like, they're all demons. No, they're not. They're not all demons, okay? But so these principles have been working now. So what I believe they were going to do, now this part is I've verified it from different sides, but I haven't seen this documentation. But what I believe they were going to do is the exchange centers were going to be FEMA camps where they were going to take us in, and I would have been like, hey, Matthew, I'm going to exchange, man. And you'd be like, all right, good luck, you know. And then I'd go in, and they'd take me in and kill me, or, you know, put me in a cage or whatever, and I'd never exchange. And you'd think, because you didn't see me anymore, that I signed a non-disclosure agreement, right? Yes. And you wouldn't even question that I was missing. And they would have done this in mass quantities because the biggest threat was the awakened public. So they took the awakened public, right, the believers, the dreamers, you know, the ideologists, right, the inventors, the authors, the artists. They took all of them, and they gave them the pipe dream of, you can spend, you know, $200 and be a millionaire, right, or a billionaire, right, and you can have this. And they told us all that so that we would all be stagnant, right? It's like from a science fiction book called The Foundation, right, where we would all be stagnant. So then what happened is all these people were making all this incredible progress, waking up, doing all these amazing things, and most people, I'd say 95% of them, stopped, and they waited for the money. And then, because they're all, you know, not all of them, most people were pretty intelligent, they became experts in the narrative that they were telling them. So everybody became experts. So people became gurus and made a living at it and did all these different things and became experts in the currency. So everybody in the currency community can spit off all these different things that are only part of the story. See, they didn't get the whole story is the problem. So the part of the story they got, a currency revaluation makes perfect sense. What they don't understand is that's not how the system actually works. That's only how it worked on the slave level. So now, that brings us current. So here's what their plan is even now, that the trustee and our whole team has been breaking up, is this. What they wanted to do is they wanted to have the currency revaluation so the banks all get liquid, right? Then instantaneously crash the U.S. dollar, thus transferring power to the East. In that, this would give opportunity to release all sorts of biological weapons. For anybody who doesn't believe that, you can go listen to the show I did earlier today with Michelle Walker, and she explains in great detail how there is, what does she call them? Designer biological weapons set to be latent in your body, infected upon us with vaccines and other ways too, right? Because it's putting smart dust in the air, that would be activated by a frequency causing biological warfare. And what would happen is you'd have this massive die-off of humans from these biological diseases. And it would become, so now imagine the scene, right? The economy collapses, right? And because the economy collapses, it's already chaos. So the United Nations has the authority in that situation, because you have a global disaster, to come in and take over every country's military. So now you don't have multiple militaries. You don't even have countries. You have the United Nations military. And they are in absolute global control of everything. And their military force is formidable, and it's everywhere. It's the NATO military, it's the UN military, and now it's the U.S. military, it's China's military, all of them on one page. And here's what they're now fighting, because they want to transition to a quote-unquote peaceful society. So to do that, they look at us as the enemy of the state. So here's the problem. Now in comes biological weapons. And you have a growing fear and concern of biological issues that are happening that they've already implanted in us, remember, with vaccines. And now they just send out a frequency that activates those viruses, and people start dying off in massive quantities. I spoke to people when this was about to go off 2 years ago, and they literally were setting them up to quarantine people up in Seattle, right? They were going to quarantine people and push them into stadiums. And one of these viruses that they have actively set in these nanites, this like microscopic technology, one of these viruses is the zombie virus, right? And they tested it down in Florida. That's why a couple of years ago you saw when these people suddenly started eating other people's faces, right? And it was like, what is going on? And what they would do is it would devour human flesh. And because the human flesh is being eaten, we would naturally crave human flesh. So people would literally become zombies eating each other, right? That's why you have shows out and movies out, and what they're doing is they show up in Seattle, you have this show called iZombie where the zombie virus breaks out. Right? And they end up quarantining Seattle, and zombies live in peace and harmony with each other, right? You just have to make sure they have enough brains, right? And so what they're doing is they're actually promoting that when you would eat someone else's brains, you would get their thoughts, their emotions, their experiences, their skills, right? So that's what they're doing with all of the technology. They're having us constantly consume someone else's thoughts, right? All the time. So we're living in a virtual world already. So they would have these viruses break out. Now imagine you've got military guys, right? So the military guys are used to when you go into battle, you get a whole bunch of vaccines, you get shot up, all types of stuff. But they don't know what they are. But I can tell you that at least some of them, I know that Agent Orange was laced with LSD, right? Now, if you've ever tripped and you had LSD, then you know what you start to see is you start to see the ugly side of people. You start to see people the way Leonardo da Vinci drew them in his ugly portraits, right? So imagine there's LSD in them. Then they're going to give them a serum to make them like super soldiers, like superstars. Now, this exists. I know this for a fact as well. This is like what they gave Jason Bourne, right? Which would make them super, like, almost indestructible. So now you've got a whole group of soldiers that are loaded up on LSD, and they're super powerful. They're much stronger than the average person. And then you have people that are literally, as far as the soldiers know, these guys are all infected with viruses that are contagious. So this would give them not just the right, but the responsibility to commit genocide on a massive scale, where they'd have to start quarantining people, blowing them up, bombing, massive shootings on a scale you couldn't even imagine, because we'd have to get rid of the disease, right? And the fight wouldn't be against the people. That's how they justify it. The fight would be against the disease. And at the same time, you have global, warming, right? It's a whole myth about global warming that they perpetuated on everyone. So at the same time, we've got to get rid of the overpopulation would happen. And what they would do is they would make it look like the environment itself had turned on humanity. And the way they do this is by dropping the smart dust from the sky. It infects everything. Then they activate a frequency which causes the environment to start to secrete radiation, causing massive death. But the plants themselves would be fine. And the animals would be fine. But the people would be suffering with radiation poisoning on a scale that would be the zombie apocalypse, literally, right? And while this is happening, this purge of most of humanity, it's written on the Georgia Guidestones. It says to bring the population to a manageable number of 500 million people. Now, that would be approximately 90% of the population. Now, remember, this all started with the global currency reset being the spark. And that's what put everybody into – and they got everybody with their guard down. They sparked all this off. Now, the power's transferred to the east. Now, the whole world's in an utter state of economic collapse. So what happens? The banks come in, and the banks say, look, you guys messed it up again, right? Because they love to shame us. You guys messed it up again, so we're going to give you cryptocurrency. We're going to make all the currency digital. Now, you've heard that, right? Cashless society, everything's digital, right? So then they're going to introduce universal income because all the money is useless. It's worth pennies. So nobody has any wealth. So just to cover now, and because we're all starving to death, right, and people are eating each other, to give us universal income, we're like, oh my God, thank you so much for the universal income. Thank you for the $18,000 a year so I can just barely survive, right? And so everybody gets the same pittance, and what does that do? That limits where you can go, what you can do, what you can see, what you're aware of, because your world becomes smaller, right? And now everybody left is a slave, and they tell you, listen, everybody's got to do their part. And the global regulatory authority on everything becomes the bankers, which are the very ones who enslaved us in the first place.
And
that was the plan.
No, that's very interesting, and thank you for that. I have a question that is maybe an umbrella question, whether it be extraterrestrial influence or some combination of the 50 or so presences that may be on the planet right now. My question is, with all that time and space and technological knowledge in advance of we little monkeys here on this planet, with all that DNA that we got deconstructed supposedly from us, where we're now down to 2 strands where there were 12, what is their game? What is the end game of this? Is this, we're talking about really exotic stuff that actually bases itself in some of the most rudimentary motives you can imagine. And my problem is actually believing that there are presences in the cosmos, in our galaxy alone, who are so rudimentary and so mundane as to not understand that there's something for all of us beyond all that mess.
Okay, so yes, of course. Excuse me. All right, so first we all have a soul contract, right? So we all came here with a purpose to learn something. And right now, we are those 12 strands of DNA, they really are symbolic of not just what's opening up in us, but they're opening the portal for a reality where we can actually thrive. Yes. And they allow us to remember who we are, allow us to access our abilities, allow us to connect to a much stronger reality, right? Now,
yes.
This is deep, this is deep, right? And nobody's really talking about this, and I certainly didn't expect to talk about it publicly, but I'm going to tell you anyways, right? So you can hear Tui talk about this. Now, he talks about the Za-Ra agreement, right? Now, the Za-Ra agreement is that the masculine or the divine masculine and divine feminine energies would separate, and in them coming back together, it reactivates our DNA, the Manna, the life force, the chi, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yes.
That really allows us to create and remember how to manifest whatever it is that we want to exist, because we are creators, because we're made from that same source energy, and realize that we can manifest anything we want. Now, in reality, I love the way Tui explained it. He said it's like you created a room, you went into the room, then forgot you created it. So the room is all you know is real. And this, by activating this, you realize you can just walk out of the room, and you can go do and be whatever you want to be, and you can create whatever you want to create, right? And so that's the Za-Ra agreement, right? Now, the Za-Ra-El agreement, right? Now, I would compare this to, see, the way, because you could get truth out of anything, right? Now, I'm not saying this is doctrine. I'm just using this as an example. So take, for example, that we tell the story about how Enki and Enlil, right, the sons of Anu, how Enki, you know, was this genetic mastermind, right? And he wasn't supposed to, but they had the Adamites, and they wouldn't breed, right? They were just, you know, they couldn't reproduce. But the first commandment was to be fruitful and multiply, right? So that was the goal. So he put the divine spark in them. Now, in Adam, so it's the one that we call Adam, right? So now, my understanding of this is that Enki himself just took on shape and form as Adam, right? So he was the divine spark. So the way the scriptures read is that Adam was made from the dust of the earth. Now, the dust is referring to both the source energy from the sun, right, the God particle, but also the elements of the earth itself, right, because that is likened unto Gaia, or God on earth, so to speak, right? So he just manifested from the dust, and what it says, it doesn't say that he blew life into him. It says he breathed life in. He breathed the breath. So in other words, he took a breath. So he took a breath and manifested as Adam. So now you have Adam not being the first man created, but really you have the first God being manifested as a human, right? And in the Garden of Eden, depending on the version of the text that you read, now you have the Bible's text and then you have the Syrian version, right? And they don't describe it the same way, but they both talk about Elohim. Now, Elohim is God's. It means there was God's plural there, right? So they were making man in their likeness and image, right? That's what it says in the scriptures and also in this other text. So the idea is that Eden wasn't necessarily, you know, this place that was Eden for humans, right? It was Eden for the gods, right? Because they could do whatever they wanted. This alternate dimension or whatever it was, right? So you have Enki taking on shape and form. Now, the agreement he made, he created Eve, right, this human, with all the parts of him that were most precious and dear to himself. He took from the chest, right, or the rib, because the rib connects directly to your heart, right? All your ribs go back to your sternum, which protects your heart. So he took from his heart, and they took from the womb. Now, the womb is the center of creation, right? It's the cradle of creation. And that's why you have woman, right? So there's two different versions of scriptures. One says rib, one says womb. So you take the rib and the womb. In other words, he made the creation from love. It's symbolic. He made from his heart, not from his knowledge of what he knew, who he was, and his history and his expectations of the future. He took all that away, and he made the woman from his heart, from the rib and the womb. So the woman is a manifestation of the love Enki had for humanity, so to speak, right? Or, you know, however you want to see it. But now here was the agreement, right? He wanted to know and understand what it was like to come to a knowledge of who you are going through the process of this creation. So he left the garden, but he and Eve, now the way it reads is this: Eve wanted to know who she was, right? That's what she wanted. So she ate of the tree of knowledge, or the tree of good and evil. And she wanted to know who she was, and once she did, because Adam loved her, he left the garden with his bride, and he ate of the tree too. So when they left the garden, what Enki did, or Adam did, is he covered his face, right? So at the gate of the garden was the Elohim, or the archangel with the fiery sword. Now, the archangel, or the Elohim, agreed to close the gateway. Now, that gateway is when the 12 strands of DNA were limited to only 2.
Yes.
And in that, it allowed humanity to go through a growth process to come to a knowledge of who they really are over a period of time, thus activating the DNA over time. And once we were able to maturely handle the creative process and the fullness of our being, that the Elohim agreed to open the gate back up, right? So to open the gate back up is to activate those DNA and allow humanity to ascend in a physical body. So our ascension is spiritual within the vast universe and infinite possibilities of the human experience. And in that, we're not limited by age, space, or time, the way we think. And as we ascend in the body, what that did was, because they the Elohim locked the garden so that these other beings couldn't physically, so to speak, interfere, right, was the idea. And we couldn't kill ourselves. Unlocking that.
I'm sorry. I've interrupted you, so let me continue, because this is burning. Explain something to me then. How is it, or how does the law develop that has, going back to Adam and Eve and that proverbial garden, how is it just a matter of having been filtered down through human beings and their base inability to really understand some of the greater concepts, or is there some other reason that as Adam took components of himself to make Eve, which I find interesting, because I would think that if anything, the Godhead would be a woman. But anyway, how did it come to be that in lore today, Eve became responsible for Adam's bad behavior? That is, for having, done whatever is negative about learning and their knowledge. But how in terms of the law?
Okay, because everything was perverted, right? So everything was perverted into utilizing black magic and repetition and ingraining us and controlling what we were manifesting, because we still had the ability to manifest our reality, right? So
yes,
alternative beings, other beings, right, outside of us came in, and they knew more than us, and they were amazing, right? And they could do stuff. So they were so impressive, we thought they were God, right? And they wanted to be worshipped, right? So because they wanted to be worshipped, and they knew the power of this whole creation was in us. So all they had to do, knowing we were diminished, was control what we thought was real, what we manifested, how we acted, and how we spoke. And in that, we created the reality based on what we're being fed from them. I'll give you an example. In the New Testament, it says the law is written in the heart and mind. Now, if you understand the principle in the Gnostic text that explains how to manifest anything into existence, it's when you match the way you feel, right, your emotional state or your heart, with what you are focused on, right? So if you're focused on, oh man, I'm so sick of this, it's so hard, I can't do this, and it makes you feel bad, that's what you manifest. At the same time, when you're in love and you're so happy, you manifest that, right? And both are true. I use the example all the time that I have twin boys. And when I was in 7th grade, I got bullied. And I wished I had a twin brother. So I told every girl I ever dated for 18 years I was going to have twin boys one day. When I was 30 years old, with no drugs, I had twin boys. Because I just, it made me excited to think about. I just loved the idea of having twin boys that I could, just be a dad to, right? And so they just came into existence, so to speak, right? I held that frequency for 18 years. Now, in like manner, that's what it means in the New Testament when it says that the law, because that's the law, that it's written in your heart and mind that the humanity, it's the same way we talk about what's above, so below, right? What's manifest in heaven, also on earth. It's the same principle of the sun, the symbiotic relationship between the sun and the earth, right? And us in the sun and the earth. All of these things are just symbolic of the heart and mind being in harmony, right? Now, evidence of that is this. You have, in the wilderness of Sinai, you have Moses go up on top of Mount Sinai. When he goes up on top of Mount Sinai, what it says is that he was given the law, right? Now, when he was given the law, he came back down from the mountain. And when he came down, they were worshiping a golden calf. And because he had just seen the shape and form of God as a man like him, he was furious. And so he threw the law down on the ground, right? Now, the way we portray the law is 2 tombstones, right? But it's not. It's really a heart. Now, imagine Moses comes down from the mountain with one tablet in the shape of a heart. And he sees them worshiping something else. So he throws it down on the ground, right? And it breaks God's heart, right? And now that is symbolic of what they're trying to do to all humanity right now. Because God is in you. Now, because God is in you, the way they keep us in control is they break your heart. They break your will. They break your hope. They fill you full of fear. They take away your love. They take away your joy. They take away all possibilities of you to be who you really are. And in doing that, they break your heart. That's their goal. So you can never let them break your heart. So then he goes back up on top of the mountain. He gets the law again. When he comes back down, now the law is detailed. Now there's 10 commandments. There's 7 on one side and 3 on the other. Not 5 and 5. There's 7 on one, 3 on the other. And in this, right, it now is in the shape and form of 2 tombstones, which is symbolic of death. And it's actually called the law of sin and death. So now, on the planet, there were 7 arks of the covenant, right? And these 7 arks of the covenant were strategically placed around the planet to hold the torus energy field in place, right? Because that is what provided the planet with life. Now, they stole the Ark of the Covenant from Egypt because it was down in the Temple of Giza, right? And it was a power source because it was a conduit for source energy. And they stole it. But what he says is they made a brand new one, but they stole it. So now they have the Ark of the Covenant. They build a temple, they build a tabernacle around it. And the tabernacle is an exact blueprint of the human body. Every single artifact in the tabernacle matches up to the human body, right? So here's what they did. Now, so you have just to give you an example, right? You have for the people to live, because the law of sin and death, if they committed a sin, they broke one of the laws, they had to bring a sacrifice. So for them to live, they had to offer up a sacrifice, and they burned it on the altar of sin sacrifice. Now, the altar of sin sacrifice had 4 sides, and it had 4 points of blood. Now, for you to live, something has to die, whether it's a plant or an animal or whatever, right? Because you need food. And in your intestines, you have an ascending, transverse, descending, and sigmoid colon. In those, there is different points in each of them where blood rushes to aid in the digestion. Something has to die for you to live, and there's 4 points of blood and a 4-sided intestine in your body, which is constantly burning with acid. So the 4-sided altar of sin sacrifice, it was 4-sided, there was 4 points of blood, and it was constantly burning. Okay, it's the same principle that's there, right? Now that repeats for every single piece of furniture in the tabernacle. Okay, so now what happens is on the day of atonement, right? So at one mint, so this is a big blueprint of a human body, right? So here's what they did, because they were trying to control humanity. The high priest would go up into the altar of incense. And underneath the altar, there was this garments of, beauty and glory, right? And he would put them on, and there was 12 stones, right? These 12, which I would imagine probably represent the 12 chakras, or represent all of humanity, right? So, or represent the 12 tribes. So he would put this on, and it basically represented all of humanity. Now, in the mind section of the tabernacle would be the most holy place. And that was protected by a blue, purple, and scarlet veil. Now, you have that principle in your neck, right? Because you have veins, arteries, and you have iodine secreted from your thyroid gland, right, creating purple. So you have same principle in that veil. Now, in that veil, it was covered with angels, right? So this was where the metaphysical reality was, right? And nobody was allowed to go in there except for the high priest one day a year. So what happened is he would go in on the right side, right? So he'd pull the veil back on the right side. He'd go up on the left side. There would be these staves that stuck out. He would walk around the altar, or the Ark of the Covenant, and he would splatter it with blood, right? And he would walk around it. Then he would go back down on the left side and come back up. And he would do that 3 times, and that would create an 8-8-8, okay?
Interesting.
And in that, that we always say, well, 8 is infinity, 8 is eternity. It is only that way because it's a set track. It's an absolute track that limits what we're able to do. It's an infinite track of the exact same thing, of repeating timelines over and over and over again. So they did that every year for 40 years as they wandered on a serpentine route in the wilderness of Sinai. And that was a spell. That was black magic being used on humanity to put us into a spell of limited possibilities of subservience, of following laws and rules as slaves. And that is what happened. So,
well, it makes sense because at one level, I'm not confirming nor denying, but I do recognize that the area roamed by the Jews was about the size of Las Vegas, the valley. How do you get lost for 40 years in Las Vegas?
I'm sorry, say that again. I got distracted.
Well, I was just saying that I'm not sure that I can confirm, but I'm just going. It makes a form of sense to me because the 40 years that supposedly the lost tribes roamed around trying to find their way, they roamed in an area about the size of Las Vegas. Anybody who's been to Las Vegas knows it's not that big a valley. So how do you get lost in that area if there isn't some sort of symbolism taking place here that's beyond? I'm guessing.
Right, and because they were never lost, right? What they did is they repeated rote patterns and repetitions until all of them, all that was who they were, all the slaves that were enslaved in Egypt, until every one of them was killed. So then you had a brand new generation. In that new generation, every one of them, all they knew was that they were dependent completely on God.
Mm-hmm.
So you created worship. Now, here's what they did. Now, when we talk about manna, right, now you talk to the tribes down in Fiji and tribes in Hawaii, they talk about manna as life, as an unlimited source, as chi, as all the things that activates us to be unlimited creators, right? But when you talk about it in the wilderness of Sinai, what is manna? Manna was a substance that fell from the sky. It was the same substance every single day. You were only allowed to take what you needed to make what you could for your family that day. And if you took any more, the next day it would be rotten. You were never allowed extra. You were limited. All you could do was be obedient. They had 613 ordinances that they had wrapped around their bodies just to remember what they were at all times.
Was it manna and quail?
Well, no. One time they asked for me, and then the way the story goes is that quail rained down from the sky, right? But the point is, but what they really had every day was manna. It was just this coriander seed. It was a type of bread, right? So what they did was they perverted.
Yes, manna. Right. Absolutely.
Right. But so what they did is they perverted the meaning of manna. And what happened is they expected manna to fall from the sky every day. So what happened? Every day manna fell from heaven. And that's what they made manna. So they made manna nothing. They made it small. They made it something that was just, it's bare need. It's your bare essentials. It's not exceptional. It's not your unlimited chi. It's not your unlimited possibilities or potential. It's just this tiny little thing. So they took something that was infinite and they made it small. And that's what they've done with humanity as well. Now, is that exactly what happened in the wilderness of Sinai? I can't say that's exactly what happened. What I can say is that spell is real. And that is exactly what they did now. They put all of humanity in a time loop that we have repeated over and over and over again. And we have come to this place to liberate ourselves, and we've been here 6 times before. But this is the time that we actually get to liberate ourselves. This is the time where we get to free ourselves, remember who we are, and step forward and prove that we have the right to be the guardians of this planet and to create a new world. Now, obviously, the GCR is not going to happen. They're still trying to cast spells on us, and they have a much stronger, entity to do it with, right? But we are the power source. We are the ones that is holding this reality in place, and we are the ones that can create the new reality. So our collective consciousness changes everything. We can change the entire world by what we're thinking about, what we believe, and what we remember about who we are. And if we can just remember that we are the unlimited beings connected to all things, that the very source of God, the source, substance, limits, bounds, essence, and origin of all things exists in totality right within us. And if we can recognize and remember that's alive in us, then we can do anything. And it doesn't take much. It can take just you and me right now. We can change the world tonight if we could just be in agreement that we are going to make every single decision and all of our creative ability in the best interest of humanity, the planet, and the individual human experience. In other words, we accept and allow people to be amazing, unique, and themselves, all by themselves. And we accept and embrace our differences and our uniqueness in those qualities, and we allow those things to be qualities that bring us closer together as a collective, willing to stand up for one another, versus allowing them to be reasons why I can't be around you.
I have a question, because this is very interesting to me. If indeed we need nothing more than a different level of consciousness to put us on the next track, then what happens to all those individuals who thought that their deliverance was going to come by way of the exchange process that you say is not going to happen?
Well, those people, they have the opportunity to be part of this as well, right? We have got to allow people to...
No. That's what I'm asking. Maybe not, because their consciousness is such that they think that they are going to, assuming that their motives are good, the people whose motives are good are in the belief that they are going to be able to, with economic capability, be able to make the changes that will free humanity. And you're suggesting that that's not part of the process. So how do they make that adjustment?
Well, so here's how they make that adjustment. See, we're about to bring in funds, right? Now, Kim has already done this. She's completely reprogrammed the financial system. Even today in this week, people think the GCR is going down. I will tell you what really happened is that the banks were told to give their liquidity over to the Federal Reserve. Now, the Federal Reserve does not have a charter. It doesn't even have access to its own financial system. It can't even look into the system. Now, that's because Kim reprogrammed it, and they can't touch it. Now, all the banks gave all of their liquidity again to the Federal Reserve because they're so programmed based on their journey through the wilderness that they think they're dependent on these people as gods, right? So that's really what all the worship goes back to, is they worship them, right? So they keep thinking they're going to come through, and they're being tested, right? So they keep staying loyal to broken principles. So once again, even though on March 15th, when they failed, they were supposed to allow the trust to bring in money. But the Rothschilds continue to hold people hostage in their psyche and in their consciousness because they still control the mainstream narrative, and they still control, these large groups, and they're still feeding them this pipe dream. So, but what will happen eventually, and I mean, by eventually, I mean it could happen tonight, right now, and it could happen a week from now or a month from now. But it's happening already. That Kim has already reprogrammed the entire financial system, okay? She's already taken over in a language that no one understands. It's written in a code that's so far beyond and so far advanced from anything we have that it will now recognize our DNA as we go to use our accounts, which means we will ultimately kind of be our own independent bank, so to speak, within a bank. And we might access things the same way. It might look the same, but we'll be able, right? Now, this doesn't mean that just wealth is going to pour out. What it means is there's people that are going to have projects. The projects will create a production line. The production line will add value to the planet and to the people. Because of that, that is the law of supply and demand. It is still economics 101. So in this money coming in, this money will go out for the projects, and as it goes out for the projects, we are not going to nickel and dime people, right? We're going to provide funding for projects, and we're going to put it all in the same basic structure. And as we do that, people will start to see the world is changing, and they're actually funding projects. And so that will kind of softly change the mentality of people, because then they'll realize, okay, the global currency reset's not real, but I have this great project. So then they'll come through the same structure. They'll submit their great project, right? And we'll fund that project. Right, and we'll talk about, and we'll have to probably manage some of the dollar amounts because, a lot of us probably going to have unlimited money, right? But that's very manageable. And over time, people will come around and projects will be funded and people will have jobs they love and start to live in a world they love, right? And we're going to bring it, and we're going to do all the same things. We're still going to bring out all the health, technology to help people's health and all these different modalities that are available now, to be honest. They're out there now. I mean, in my group alone, I have access to, the cure for AIDS, the cure for cancer, the cure for Ebola, frequency cures that will literally reverse your age, all types of things. And it's all available now. It's really here now. And what will happen is people will slowly start to activate after they get over that they were wrong, right? Because there is going to be a portion of this where people are just going to be bitter. And some people are not going to accept it. They're just going to be like, it can't be, I'm not doing it, and they're going to fight. And that's fine. And that's okay. That's a choice they get to make, right? But in reality, it'll bring the consciousness around. And to be honest with you, Matthew, I'm not concerned about trying to convince people that this is real, and I don't feel a responsibility to do that for them. What I care about is people who want to make a difference, who are willing to put their ego aside and actually get funded and go and change the world. Those are the people I care about and I'm genuinely invested in. And I'm going to make sure those people get funding and they're given the opportunity, and we all agree to the same principles, right? We all operate according to the same general principles, right? But I don't believe in limiting what people can do. I don't believe in micromanaging what people can do. We have got to let people blossom. We've got to let people go and come up with better ways to do things and grow and take this limited view and expand it so they can discover who they are. So that's how I see it going down. Does that make sense?
Well, no, actually, it makes a lot of sense in that I don't think it's really, in a funny way, it's not possible to really achieve the ends of freeing the planet without doing just that. I think you have to introduce people to their own, let's call it power for lack of a better term, and then leave them, trust them, let them be free to do that. I mean, otherwise, we're pissing in the wind here. Otherwise, there is no real freedom. We're just, as I said, swapping a Chevy for a Dodge.